Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to Counselor's Couch 101. I'm still Jim Stump, still crazy after all these years. Let those who have ears understand that one, right? Recently, I received a comment to a post I put up, and a lady said that in the course of her comment, she said that she had always wanted to be a counselor, but she had never had the time or the money to put in order to study and be licensed and so forth. But she said she was a life coach. I responded back to her and I said, if you're a life coach, you are a counselor. People have asked me often, how I got into this business and all that. And did I always want to be a counselor? And did I go to study for counseling as an undergraduate, et cetera, et cetera? And I say, no, that's not true at all. The way I got into this business, I sort of slid into it sideways. What was happening was I'd always been interested in counseling. I read all the pop psychology books of the day, right? And I just found it all fascinating. And along the way, I was asked to be a peer counselor at a church. Do you know what peer counseling is? That's when a church member spends time talking with another church member who is upset or needs someone to listen to their story or help them out with some difficulty they're going through. So the peer counselor is not a necessarily trained or licensed person. It's just another member of the church who's willing to help other people out. I did that for a time, and then I spoke to the director at one point, and I said, I don't feel like I know enough to do this work because people are coming in to talk who have very serious problems and issues going on. I don't think I have the training to help them with any of it. So I really thought that I should go off and study counseling and psychology. And she said, well, you can if you want to. There's nothing wrong with it. It'd probably be good to know and all that. But the kind of counseling we do here is not exactly that. We're offering people moral support and guidance as far as how God would want us to live, etc. But if you want to study psychology, go ahead and do it. Well, that started me off. And from the first class until the day I got my license, it was slightly over 6 years, right? Because first you have to go to school, you have to get an advanced degree in psychology, and then you take internships and start training, etc., etc. You put in your time, you put in your years, you get your experience, and then you take your tests and you become licensed if you can get all of that done, right? So after those 6+ years, I happened to be speaking to the pastor of that church that I had been doing the peer counseling in previously. And he said, okay, now that you've been through all this and you've done all these things, what's your takeaway? What do you think of it all? What's the bottom line? And I stopped and I said, well, that's a good question. I hadn't thought of it before. And all of a sudden it occurred to me. I said to him, after all that time, I feel like I've learned everything there is to know about an illusion. Everything there is to know about an illusion. It seemed that all the counseling theorists throughout history and through the development of psychotherapy and so forth, they were working on ideas that they came up with while talking to people, things that occurred to them. They developed techniques based on their experience talking to other people. And so those experiences and those techniques and those approaches kept changing over time in the sense that we get new ones, right? New people would come along, they'd take all the old training, they'd put it to use, and then they would see what they would come up with as far as results. And then they would alter and hopefully improve upon that which had been taught previously, right? Isn't that the way everything develops? We all build off of what came before, right? So, and the thing I noticed along the way, I was very conscientious when I was a student. I still am, still studying. I take it seriously. But I noticed a lot of the interns, or the last ones I worked with, they felt like since they had been to school and all, that they had learned it all, that there was nothing left to know about counseling. And they pretty much just blew off what we called internship or a supervision and things like that. They just felt like they didn't need it. They already been to school. And I remember back to one of my first mentors and teachers in the practical side of learning how to counsel. He said in school, you learn a lot of theory, you learn about a lot of pioneers, you learn a lot of information. It's all good. It's all good to know. It's all good to have in your head and use when you talk to people. He said, but you don't learn counseling there. You learn counseling here in the internship when you're actually working with people, right? That's where you learn how to counsel. So I go into a session, I sit with a roster of clients, and then I'd go back to my mentor and my supervisor, and we'd talk about all the sessions I had that week and what I had learned or where I had succeeded or where I had failed, and I'd try to improve what I was doing with the people I was working with. That's the process, and you go through that for a few years until you get to the point where hopefully you're benefiting someone, right? I've mentioned this before, but I've seen counselors who I thought were completely inappropriate in their approach. And by that, I mean what they would do is they would talk and talk and talk. And I always thought that counseling was more about listening, right? We listen to someone and we let them get their emotional turmoil out into the open. People always tell me they feel better when they're allowed to talk about things that they can't talk about with anyone else. So it's not a question of the counselor going on and on and on about theory or brain chemistry or whatever, or trying to bend people into their approach to thinking about psychology. It's about what does the client need. And in order to find out what the client needs, one has to listen. Listen to the person. That's the most important thing you can do as a counselor. And I recall once when I was in psychology school. I call it psychology school because it's a graduate program, but it's a fun way to think of it. I went to psychology school, right? And I was talking to her about some of the experiences I'd had in practicum working with folks and etc. And I was telling her I felt like I didn't know how to do something. And she told me, she says, well, it's a question of figuring out how Jim is going to do counseling. She said, I do counseling my way. I do it what fits me and what works between me and the person I'm talking to. And all these other teachers in here, they do it their way too. We are all expressing our personalities in our work. She said, you have to figure out how Jim is going to do counseling. That's the only thing you need to know. You don't have to pattern yourself or be like some other counselor who's telling you how to be with the people you're talking to. Figure out how you're going to do it. And what do we bring to counseling, right? You know, we talk about, I'm not a counselor because I don't have a license, the lady said. What we bring to counseling, first of all, is a willingness to listen. But even more important than that, I think, it's we bring our beingness, we bring our personality, we bring our empathy and our sympathy, right? We sit with the person, we let them express all the ugliness, as Kevin Lake says. We let them express all the ugliness and the ugly places they're in and have been. Let them get it out. And then, if possible, we can help them find their own direction with the issues that they're having and the solutions that they want to create, right? So that's the way I do it. Listen carefully, listen long, and then ask questions to clarify what the person is thinking, what they've been through, and where they'd like to go, and possibly how they'd like to get there. I've said it before, I say it again. It is not up to me to make a decision for the client. All I'm there to do is to help the client find their own solutions, their own ways of behaving and moving into the future, the things that they want to change. That's what I'm there to do, is to help them find that. And if they do that and they find it of themselves and by themselves, in the sense that they're processing it out loud with you, it's going to stick. It's going to work better than me telling them, well, you got to go home and do this and you got to go home and do that, right? I have known counselors to do that, and I positively know that the clients in those situations learn nothing, and most often those clients don't come back because they haven't been helped. I don't need another person telling me how to run my life, is their thought. What I need is someone to understand me and to get me and to empathize, sympathize with what I'm going through. That's what I need. So people say they can't be a counselor. I think anyone could be a counselor if you want to help another person, right? Anyone can lend a listening ear and lend sympathy and the like. And one side point, when I work with folks, I don't know them in their personal lives, right? I don't see them at church. They're not my neighbor. In fact, when we run into those kinds of requests for help, we usually have to refer them to other people. The reason for that is I don't want to have that person go through their life and know that someone walking around right next to them knows all the stuff that they've been talking about and the stuff that bothers them. It sort of forces them to live with it, and it affects their behavior in the moment, knowing that all their secrets are right there in the person who's standing or next to them or sitting next to them in a pew or whatever it is, right? So what we want to do is we want to work with a person and then give them their privacy. They have their lives separate from the activities I'm involved in. When you do peer counseling, you can't do that exactly because you are in the same area, in the same group, and you are in the same activities. So what I advise is that if you're doing peer counseling, once they leave the counseling session, you forget everything you have just heard. You forget it in the sense that you're not going to bring it up. You're not going to allude to it. You're not going to say anything about it in other circumstances. Say if you're at a potluck or something, you're not going to bring it up. You've completely forgotten about it. Don't give them any kind of a knowing look. Don't nod and so, yeah, I know that one. Don't do any of that stuff. Just forget about it. Now, if the other person brings something up, then you can address it. And if they ask you why you're not talking about it, you say, what I just told you is it's to give you your privacy. I don't want you to think you have to live with it in your day-to-day life and in your activity here in this group, right? I don't want to do that to you. So I just put it aside after we're done talking. And when you want to, if you want to come back and talk again, then I'll remember it. I'll remember it and we'll pick up where we were. Other than that, I want you to know that you have privacy. And I'm not going to try to invade that or um, um, expose what you've told me in any way. That's just a side point. And as far as learning, I've known several counselors who have been counseling for 40 years who've told me they're still wondering if they're doing it right. And they're still wondering if there's more that they could learn. And that's the way I feel too. I think I learn more from people I talk with than they get from me. I'm constantly learning, constantly reading, constantly trying to grow and improve in how I can relate to people. Again, remember, the basic element of good counseling is a connection, um, an empathetic, sympathetic connection between the two people. It's who you are, it's your personality. Are you a good person? Do you have a calming energy, or are you frantic? Now, sometimes people want a different approach. Oftentimes, men want a manly approach to what they're talking about. Other times, other people want softer approaches. They don't want to be attacked. So that's sort of a thing we have to gauge when we're working with folks, is try to match what their needs are to the way we behave with them, right? But other than that, it's who we are. If the person is comfortable with me talking with me, then we're going to get something done. They're going to feel more confident and free to speak about the things that bother them. And if they're not comfortable with you, they're less likely to talk. And like I say, most of the time they drift away. Um, I've talked to a lot of people who've come back and thanked me. A lot of people say that I've helped them a lot, but I've also had many, many, many failures. I'll talk about that at some other time. But at the root of the failures of all of them, I believe, so far that is, I might change my mind with new experiences in education. But the root of failures, I think, is a failure to connect emotionally. I think at base that's what it is. We didn't connect, and so I was unable to let that person feel comfortable and confident to speak with me about their issues. If I can connect with someone and they can talk about those issues, we have a good chance of arriving at some sort of a satisfactory conclusion. You want to be a counselor? It just means sitting with someone, letting them talk, letting them get it out, and don't throw it back at them at another time. Be empathetic. Don't tell people what they have to do with their life. Let them figure it out for themselves, and you help them if they so want by asking questions as to what they want to accomplish, who do they want to be. You clarify the issues that they say they're having, and we do that so that the person who we're talking with can find their own answers. That's basically it. Let me rephrase that. That's how Jim does counseling. I don't know for sure how you are going to do counseling, but if you care about your people, I'll bet you'll be good at it, right? That's the way that goes. Still crazy. Um, it's really rewarding when it works. It is really rewarding when it works. So, life coach, you are a counselor. Don't ever forget it. Go out and help people. Thanks for stopping by. I've enjoyed it. I look forward to talking with you next time.